confession can free the soul, but sometimes awaken what should have stayed buried. Subscribe to uncover the chilling truth behind the veil of the dead. The story begins. It started with whispers in the dark, until the whispers started calling my name. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I spoke to the dead. It wasn't something I advertised. Not after what happened to my grandmother, a famed medium in the 70s who vanished one night after a séance gone wrong. People said she opened a door she couldn't close. I never believed it. Until it happened to me. It began innocently enough. A grieving widow, Mrs. Langley, begged me to contact her late husband. I was hesitant. I'd only ever dabbled in spirit communication, nothing serious, but the desperation in her eyes wore me down. That night, in her dimly lit parlor, I laid out the Ouija board, lit the candles, and called his name. Thomas Langley. If you're here, give us a sign. The planchette moved immediately. Not the slow, deliberate motion I was used to. This was violent, jerking toward the letters. Trapp. Mrs. Langley gasped. Thomas? Is that you? Then, the planchette spiraled wildly before stopping on a word I'd never seen it land on before. Rn. The candles blew out. Mrs. Langley screamed. I fumbled for my flashlight, my heart hammering. When the light flicked on, the board was scratched, deep grooves cutting through the letters as if clawed by invisible fingers. I packed up immediately, making excuses about interference and negative energy. But as I stepped outside, I heard it. A whisper, so close it brushed my ear. You shouldn't have called. I spun around. No one was there. That was the first night I dreamed of the woman in the black dress. She stood at the foot of my bed, her face blurred, her mouth moving like she was speaking, but no sound came out. Except, I felt her words. You're next. I woke up screaming. The dreams didn't stop. Every night, the woman in the black dress returned, closer each time. Her features remained smudged, as if someone had rubbed them out of an old photograph, but her presence was suffocating. I'd wake up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat, my throat raw from screaming. I tried everything. Sleeping pills, white noise, even blessing my apartment with sage. Nothing worked. Then, the messages started. It was small things at first. My radio flicking to static in the middle of the night. My reflection in the mirror blinking when I didn't. Then, one morning, I found words scrawled across my bathroom mirror in fog, as if written by a cold finger. You let her in. I nearly called a priest. Instead, I did something worse. I reached out to another medium, an old friend of my grandmother's named Miriam. She took one look at me and paled. You've got a hitchhiker, she said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. And not the kind that just wants to say hello. Miriam explained that when I used the Ouija board with Mrs. Langley, I hadn't just contacted Thomas. I'd invited something else in. Something that had been waiting for an open door. The woman in your dreams? Miriam exhaled smoke, her eyes dark. She's not a ghost. She's a reaper, a spirit that feeds on the energy of the dying. And she thinks you're her next meal. I laughed. I actually laughed, because this had to be a joke. Right, then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo of me, asleep in my bed last night. The woman in the black dress stood over me, her blurred face turned toward the camera. The caption read, Soon. Miriam's face went grim. You need to close the door. Now. She handed me a list of instructions. Salt circles, iron nails under my pillow, a chant to banish unwanted spirits. I followed them all that night, whispering the words like a prayer. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreams. I thought it was over. Then, at 3:07 a.m., my phone rang. No caller ID. I answered. A voice, wet, gurgling, like someone drowning, whispered, You can't get rid of me that easy. The line went dead, and from the corner of my room, a shadow moved. I stopped sleeping. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the window, sent my heart into a frenzy. The woman in the black dress no longer waited for dreams. She lingered in the corners of my vision. A smudged silhouette just out of focus. Miriam warned me not to engage. "She wants your fear," she said. "Starve her." But fear wasn't something I could just turn off. Then came the email. The subject line was blank. The body of the message contained only a single sentence. "You owe me a name." Attached was an audio file. My hands shook as I clicked it. Static. Then, "Evelyn." My blood turned to ice. It was my voice, but not from any recording I'd ever made. It sounded warped, stretched thin, like a voice pulled from the bottom of a well. "Say my name, and I'll stop." I slammed my laptop shut. That's when I made my first mistake that I called Mrs. Langley. She answered on the first ring, her voice brittle. "I was about to call you." I didn't like the way she said it. She told me Thomas had been visiting her too. Knocks on the walls, cold spots in the house, the smell of his cologne. But then, last night, something changed. "He told me to give you a message," she whispered. "He said, she's lying. She was never dead." I didn't understand. Who's lying? The line crackled. Then, a new voice. Rasping, guttural. Cut through. "Me," Mrs. Langley screamed. The call dropped. I tried calling back. No answer. By the time I got to her house, the police were already there. Mrs. Langley was dead. They said it was a heart attack. Natural causes. But I saw the way the paramedics avoided looking at her face, the way her mouth was stretched too wide, her eyes bulging, as if she'd seen something impossible before she died. And on the wall above her, written in something dark and sticky, "Your turn." I ran. Back at my apartment, I tore through my grandmother's old journals, desperate for answers. That's when I found it. A faded newspaper clipping from 1978. Local medium disappears after controversial séance. The article mentioned a woman in a black dress who had attended that night. A woman no one remembered inviting. The last line made my stomach drop. Witnesses claim the woman was not among the living. I was out of options, so I did the one thing Miriam told me never to do. I decided to talk to her directly. The air in my apartment felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth. I sat cross-legged on the floor, a ring of salt around me, a single black candle flickering between my shaking hands. Miriam had warned me. Never invite a spirit to speak freely. But I was out of choices. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. "Who are you?" The candle flame stretched unnaturally tall, then turned a sickly green. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in visible puffs as the voice I'd heard on the phone slithered through the room. "You know my name." I didn't, but my grandmother had. Frantically, I flipped through her journals until I found it. A single entry, written in shaky handwriting the night before she vanished. She calls herself Ouija, not a ghost, not a demon, something older. She doesn't just feed on the dying. She collects them. The pages that followed were torn out. A sharp crack made me jump. The candle had split clean down the middle, green wax bubbling like acid. The voice grew louder, angrier. "Say it." I clenched my teeth. "Ouija." The moment the name left my lips, every light in the apartment blew out. The windows rattled violently, and then laughter. Not from one voice, but dozens, overlapping in a grotesque chorus. The salt circle was broken. Something grabbed my hair, yanking me backward. I screamed, clawing at the floor as an invisible force dragged me toward the hallway mirror. My reflection grinned at me, but it wasn't my face. Pale, hollow-eyed, lips stitched shut with black thread. The woman in the black dress. "You called me," my reflection mouthed. "Now you come with me." I wrenched free, slamming the mirror face down onto the floor. The glass shattered, and so did the voices, shrieking in fury that I didn't stop running until I was in my car, speeding toward the only place left, the abandoned church where my grandmother held her final séance. The police tape from 1978 still hung, brittle with age, across the door, Inside, the air smelled of rot and burnt hair. The séance table stood untouched, a thick layer of dust covering the Ouija board still laid out atop it, and in the center, a single, fresh handprint as if someone had been waiting. Should I continue with the final chapter? Word count so far, 2,700. The truth behind Ouija is about to be revealed. Let me know if you want the chilling conclusion. Part 5. The last séance, 700 plus words. The moment I stepped inside the church, the door slammed shut behind me. Dust swirled in the dim light as I approached the table, my pulse roaring in my ears. The Ouija board's planchette sat motionless, until my shadow fell across it. Then, it twitched and I knew what I had to do. With shaking hands, I placed my fingers on the planchette and spoke. "Grandmother, are you here?" The air grew thick. The planchette shot to yes. Tears burned my eyes. "I need your help. Ouija." The planchette spasmed, racing across the board. A deafening thud came from the church rafters. I looked up and saw her. Ouija crouched like a spider in the shadows, her stitched mouth curling into a smile. "Clever girl." Her voice slithered through my mind. But not clever enough. The planchette kept moving. Beach Ui turned just in time to see Mrs. Langley's corpse lurch from the shadows, her dead fingers grasping. I screamed, stumbling back as the planchette spelled one final word. In the church erupted into chaos. Pews flew like kindling. The stained glass windows shattered inward, spraying glass like rain. And through it all, Ouija crawled, her limbs bending impossibly, her stitched mouth straining as she whispered, "You're mine now." I grabbed the Ouija board and smashed it against the floor. A howl tore through the church. Not just from Ouija, but from hundreds of voices. The walls bled black ooze. The ground trembled. And then silence. When I opened my eyes, the church was empty.
No ligeia. No corpses.
Just the broken board at my feet. But in the dust where the table had been, 2 words were scrawled. She lied. I never spoke to the dead again. But sometimes, when the phone rings at 3 a.m., I still hear breathing on the other end.